Hello everyone and welcome back to Shadow Man Stories. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Robert Nightshade, and for 18 years I taught people how to survive in the wild. Before that, I spent a decade in the military, training Special Forces soldiers how to live off the land when everything went wrong. I could start a fire with wet wood. I could find water where others saw only dust. I could track a deer through rock and mud and tell you what it ate for breakfast. I'm telling you this so you understand. I wasn't some city guy who got scared by shadows. I knew the wilderness. I respected it. And I never, not once, believed in the stories. Cranberry Wilderness in West Virginia became my home in 1963. 75 square miles of the most beautiful, untouched land you've ever seen. Right in the heart of it sat the Cranberry Glades, a 750-acre bog system that shouldn't exist this far south. It was a leftover from the Ice Age, a piece of ancient history that somehow survived when everything else changed. The bogs were my favorite place to teach. Sphagnum moss thick as carpet. Carnivorous plants that ate insects. Water so acidic it could preserve wood for centuries. I'd bring my students there and show them how even the strangest places could keep you alive if you knew what you were doing. The local folks didn't like the Glades much. Old families, been here for generations. They had stories about the bogs going back to the Cherokee, tales about something that lived in the deep water, something that pulled people under and never let go. The Cherokee supposedly called the area cursed and refused to hunt there. I figured it was just old superstition. Maybe someone drowned in the bog centuries ago and people built stories around it. That's what people do. They make up monsters to explain bad luck. September of 1981 changed everything. I was running a survival course, 6 adults who'd paid good money to learn primitive skills. Weekend warriors mostly, but serious ones. The kind who wanted to really learn, not just take photos. Their leader was a guy named Marcus Webb, an experienced outdoorsman from Pennsylvania. He'd done survival training before. He knew what he was doing. The plan was simple. 5 days in the wilderness, living off the land. They'd build shelters, start fires without matches, identify edible plants, standard stuff. I'd check on them each day, but mostly they'd be on their own. That was the point, to prove they could do it. On the 3rd day, they didn't show up at the checkpoint. I waited 2 hours at Fallen Oak Ridge, the place we'd agreed to meet. The morning fog was thick that day. It rolled through the glades like smoke, making everything look strange, but fog was normal in September. Nothing to worry about. When they still hadn't shown by noon, I hiked to their camp. The camp was empty, but it wasn't abandoned. That was the weird part. Their shelters were still standing, well-built and sturdy. The fire pit had cold ashes, maybe 8 hours old. Their packs were sitting right where they'd left them, food still inside. Nobody packing up to leave would forget their food. I checked Marcus's pack first. He'd organized everything military style, everything in its place. But when I opened it, my stomach dropped. Someone had taken every item out and arranged them in a circle on the ground. Compass, knife, water bottle, first aid kit. 12 items in a perfect ring. In the center, Marcus had written in the dirt with a stick, "Stay away from water." My hands started shaking, and I didn't like that. I'd seen a lot of strange things in 18 years. People did weird stuff when they got scared or lost. But Marcus wasn't the type to panic. I radioed back to the ranger station. My partner, Jim Williams, said he'd bring the tracking dogs and meet me at the camp in 3 hours. While I waited, I searched the area. The tracks were all wrong. 6 sets of boot prints heading toward the glades, like they were walking in a line, not spread out like people exploring, not scattered like people searching for something. A straight line, like they were following someone, or being herded. The tracks led right to the edge of Big Bog, the deepest section of the glades. At the water's edge, they just stopped. All 6 sets of prints, ending at the same spot. Like all 6 people had walked into the water together and kept going. I knelt down and looked at the water. The surface was perfectly still. Bog water is dark. Tannins from decaying plants turn it the color of tea. You can't see more than a few inches down. But something about it looked wrong that day. The water seemed thicker somehow. And there were patterns in it, geometric shapes in the algae, like something big had moved through recently and disturbed everything in straight lines. Jim arrived with the dogs just before sunset. We had 2 German shepherds, Max and Duke, the best tracking dogs in 3 counties. They'd found lost hikers in snowstorms. They'd tracked injured hunters through miles of forest. They'd never failed. Until that day. We brought them to the tracks, let them smell one of Marcus's shirts. They whined. Their ears went flat. Max started backing away, pulling at the leash so hard he was choking himself. Duke dropped to his belly and wouldn't move. "What's wrong with them?" Jim asked. I didn't answer. I was watching the water. The fog was getting thicker as the sun went down, and somewhere out in the bog, something made a sound like a log rolling over. But I could see all the logs from where we stood. Nothing had moved. "We'll search at first light," I said, "with more people." Jim nodded. He kept looking at the dogs. Max was shaking. We camped on high ground that night, away from the water. I didn't sleep much. Every sound seemed too loud. The fog pressed close to our tent, and I kept thinking about those boot prints, all 6 of them, walking straight into the water like they had no choice. Like something had called them in. Dawn came gray and cold. We had 8 rangers now, plus a volunteer search and rescue team from 3 towns over. 15 people total. We split into 3 groups to search the bog system. I took the first group along the western edge of Big Bog. The fog hadn't lifted. If anything, it was worse. Visibility maybe 30 feet. We called out names every few minutes and listened for responses. All we heard was our own voices echoing back, flat and strange. Around 10 in the morning, we found the first body. Sarah Chen had been the youngest in the survival group, 28, an accountant from Pittsburgh. She'd been excited about the course, asked a million questions, took notes on everything I taught. She was floating face down in a shallow section tangled in the roots of a dead tree. Jim and I waded in to pull her out. The water was ice cold, colder than it should have been. When we turned her over, I had to step back. Her eyes were open, staring. But that wasn't the worst part. Her face was covered in scratches, deep, parallel lines like she'd clawed at herself. Her hands were shredded, fingernails torn off, and her lips were moving. "Jim," I said. "Jim, she's—" But then I saw her chest. It wasn't moving. No breath. She was dead, had been for hours. The water was just making her lips move, current pushing through her mouth. We got her to shore and called it in. While we waited for the coroner, I examined the scratches. They were wrong. The pattern was too regular, too precise. And they were deep. Some went all the way to bone. Whatever had done this had taken its time. "Robert." Jim was standing at the water's edge, looking down. "Come see this." In the mud, just at the waterline, was a track. Not a boot print. Not an animal print I recognized. It was huge, 18 inches long, maybe 10 inches wide. 5 distinct marks like this, but with something extra. Drag marks between them, like webbing. "What the hell makes a print like that?" Jim asked. I didn't answer. I was thinking about the Cherokee stories, the ones I'd dismissed as superstition. We found 2 more bodies by noon. Marcus Webb and another man named David Torres, both in shallow water, both with the same scratches, both with that same frozen expression, like they'd died trying to scream but couldn't remember how. The search commander called it off at 2 p.m. "Something in the water's killing people," he said. "Could be toxic algae, could be bacteria. Nobody goes near the water until we get the CDC up here to test it." But I'd seen the track. I'd seen how the bodies were arranged. Algae didn't do that. Bacteria didn't drag people into specific positions. That night, Jim and I stayed late at the ranger station going over maps. The glades covered 750 acres, but most of it was shallow, 3 feet deep at most. There were a few deep spots, places where the peat had collapsed and created pools. Big Bog had the deepest spot, over 20 feet down in the center. The other 3 are still out there, Jim said. We have to find them. Not in the water, I said. We searched the dry areas. They might have run, might have made it out. But I didn't believe it. And from the look on Jim's face, neither did he. We went back out at dawn with a new plan. Stay away from the water. Search the high ground, the islands of solid earth between the bogs. Use ropes to connect us. Don't let anyone get separated. Around 9 a.m., we found where the group had camped their second night. The shelter was crude but functional. The fire pit was full of bones. Jim picked one up. Rabbit? He asked. I took it from him. It was human, a finger bone, adult-sized, old. The ends were worn smooth, like it had been in the bog for years. We found more bones in the shelter, dozens of them, ribs, vertebrae, part of a skull, all arranged in patterns, circles and lines and shapes I didn't recognize, like someone had been using them to decorate. They found these in the bog, I said. The peat preserves everything. These could be 100 years old, could be 500. Why would they dig them up? Jim asked. I didn't have an answer. The bones had been placed carefully, almost lovingly. Someone had spent hours arranging them. But why? We kept searching. By noon, we'd found 2 more campsites. More bones at each one, more patterns. And at the third site, we found a journal. It belonged to Marcus. The entries started normal, notes about shelter building, edible plants, water sources. But on the second day, the writing changed. September 10th. Something in the water. Saw ripples moving against the current. Circular pattern, getting wider. Watched for 20 minutes. Nothing broke the surface, but I know something was there. Sarah says she heard singing last night. We all heard it, but nobody wants to talk about it. September 11th. Found bones in the peat. Hundreds of them. Some are arranged in circles. Some look like they were placed deliberately. David wants to leave, but I'm not sure which way is out. The compass isn't working right. It keeps pointing toward the deep water. September 12th. It came out last night. I saw it. God help me, I saw it. 20 feet long at least. Too many legs. Too many everything. It stood at the water's edge and looked at our camp. Just looked. Didn't move. Didn't make a sound. Just looked with eyes that reflected the firelight like a cat's eyes, but bigger. When it went back into the water didn't splash. It just opened up and accepted it. The last entry was just one line, written in shaky letters. It's calling us. We have to go to it. We don't want to, but we have to. Jim's hands were shaking as he held the journal. This is insane. He was hallucinating. Had to be. But I was thinking about the boot prints, 6 sets, walking in a line toward the water. I was thinking about the dogs refusing to track. I was thinking about that sound I'd heard the first night, like a log rolling over. We need to search the deep water, I said. Jim looked at me like I was crazy. The commander said, the commander isn't here, and those 3 people are still missing. We went back to the station and got the dive equipment. By the time we returned to Big Bog, it was late afternoon. The fog was rolling in again, thick and low. I volunteered to go in. Jim would manage the safety line from shore, standard procedure. We'd done it a dozen times for drowning victims. The water was worse than I'd expected, cold enough to hurt, dark enough that my flashlight only penetrated a few feet. The bottom was soft, and every movement stirred up clouds of sediment that made visibility even worse. I went down slowly, following the contour of the bottom. At 15 feet, I found the first body, Robert Kim, one of the survival students. He was sitting upright on the bottom, eyes open, arms at his sides, like he'd just decided to sit down and stay there forever. I secured a line to him and signaled Jim to pull him up. Then I went deeper. At 18 feet, the bottom dropped away sharply. My flashlight beam just disappeared into blackness. I could feel a current down there, cold water moving up from somewhere below. The thermometer on my gear said 42 degrees. That was impossible. The surface water was in the 60s. I was about to surface when I saw the opening. It was a hole in the bottom of the bog, maybe 6 feet across. The edges were smooth, like something had carved them. Bog water was being pulled into it, a slow but steady current. I could feel the suction from 10 feet away. Something moved in the darkness below. I don't know how to describe it. It was too big to be a fish, too fast to be a person. It passed through my flashlight beam for just a second, something pale and segmented like an insect leg, but as thick as my torso. Then it was gone. I yanked the line 3 times, emergency signal, and started up fast. Maybe too fast. I broke the surface gasping, ripped my regulator out. "Something's down there," I shouted. "Something big!" Jim was pulling me toward shore when the water exploded 20 feet to our right. Something massive breached the surface. I got a glimpse of ridged plates, multiple limbs, a head that was all wrong, and then it crashed back down. The wave hit us, knocked Jim off his feet, pulled me back toward deep water. I swam harder than I'd ever swum in my life. Jim grabbed my gear and hauled me onto solid ground. We didn't stop running until we were 50 yards from the water's edge. When we looked back, the surface was calm again, perfectly still, like nothing had happened. "Did you see it?" I asked. Jim nodded. His face was white. "What the fuck was that?" I didn't answer, because I knew. Somewhere deep in my bones, in the part of my brain that still remembered what it was like to be prey, I knew. The Cherokee had been right. We didn't go back to the station that night. We couldn't. Our radio wasn't working, nothing but static. Jim's truck wouldn't start. Battery was dead, even though it had been fine that morning. Even our watches had stopped. We built a fire on high ground, far from the water, and waited for dawn. Neither of us slept. We didn't talk much either. What was there to say? We'd both seen it. We both knew what it meant. Around midnight, we heard the singing. It came from the direction of the bog, a low, resonant sound that wasn't quite music and wasn't quite speech. It had a pattern to it, rising and falling, like a call. The sound made my teeth hurt, made my eyes water, made something deep in my chest want to respond. "Don't listen to it," I said. "Whatever you do, don't listen." But Jim was already standing up, turning toward the water. "Jim!" I grabbed his arm. "Sit down. Don't look at it." He blinked, shook his head like he was waking up. "Did you hear that? It sounded like my daughter, like Emily calling for me." "It's not your daughter. Emily's in Ohio with your ex-wife. That thing in the water is trying to get you to come closer." The singing continued for another hour. Sometimes it sounded like a child crying. Sometimes it sounded like laughter. Sometimes it sounded like words in a language I almost recognized. Every time it made me want to walk toward the water. Every time I had to fight the urge. When it finally stopped, the silence was worse. Dawn came with no fog for once. Clear sky, bright sun. We could see the entire bog system from our hilltop. And what we saw made my blood freeze. There were things moving in the water, dozens of them, breaking the surface just enough to create ripples, then disappearing, creating patterns, circles and lines and geometric shapes, like a language written in water. "There's more than one," Jim whispered. I counted at least 20 distinct disturbances, maybe more. They were coordinating, moving in formation. Whatever we'd seen yesterday wasn't alone. We needed help. We needed the military. We needed someone who could deal with this. But first, we had to get out of the wilderness. The hike back should have taken 4 hours. It took 8. Every time we got close to the trail, we'd find ourselves going in circles. The compass was useless. It spun constantly or pointed toward the bog. The sun seemed to move wrong in the sky. Landmarks we'd passed 100 times weren't where they should be. "It's changing the landscape," Jim said around noon, "or making us see it wrong." We found the trail finally, late afternoon, but it was blocked. A massive tree had fallen across the path, a healthy oak that looked like something had twisted it until it snapped. The break was fresh, still dripping sap. While we were figuring out how to get around it, Jim screamed. He was standing at the edge of the trail, looking down into a ravine. I ran over, grabbed him before he could fall. At the bottom of the ravine, maybe 30 feet down, was the last missing person from the survival group, Jay. Jennifer Walsh, 42, a teacher from Maryland. She was standing in ankle-deep water, perfectly still, looking up at us. "Jennifer," I shouted. "Stay there. We're coming down." She didn't respond, didn't blink, just stared. Jim and I scrambled down the slope. It was steep and loose, but we made it. Jennifer still hadn't moved. As we got closer, I saw why. She was standing on something. The water around her feet was churning, rippling, and below her, just barely visible through the murky water, were shapes. Long shapes, segmented shapes, holding her in place. "Jennifer," I said quietly, "we're going to get you out. Don't move." Her mouth opened. The voice that came out wasn't hers. "Go away," she said in a tone that was too deep, too resonant. "This is our place. Always has been. You don't belong." Jim raised his gun. When had he drawn his gun? But I pushed it down. That's not her talking. Something's controlling her. Jennifer's head tilted to an impossible angle, 45 degrees to the side. "We've been here since the ice, since before the two legs came. We sleep in the deep places. We wait in the cold. And when we wake, we feed." "How many of you are there?" I asked. Her smile was all wrong, too wide. "Enough." The water around her feet erupted. I got a clear look this time. 6 legs, each one segmented and plated with chitin, moving with horrible grace. A body like a salamander's, but armored, scaled, ancient. And the head was a nightmare. Flat and wide, with eyes that ran in a line across the front. 6 of them, each one independently tracking. The mouth was underneath, circular, ringed with rows of teeth that spiraled inward. It was designed to latch onto prey and not let go. It pulled Jennifer under in one smooth motion. No splash. She didn't scream. The water accepted her like she'd always belonged there. Jim and I ran. We crashed through the UNA. Durgrowth slipped on rocks, didn't care. Behind us, we could hear water moving. Lots of water. They were following us, herding us away from the path, driving us deeper into the wilderness. We came out on the shore of Big Bog just as the sun was setting. We'd run in a complete circle. The creatures had brought us right back to where we'd started. "They're playing with us," Jim said. He was crying, though I don't think he knew it. The water in front of us began to ripple, not randomly, in a pattern. Circles within circles, expanding outward. And then they rose from the bog. 6 of them. Each one 12 feet long, armored in overlapping plates that looked like tree bark but moved like muscle. 6 legs each, ending in clawed feet with webbing between the toes. Those horrible flatheads with the rings of eyes, all watching us with an intelligence that was patient and hungry and older than anything had a right to be. They didn't attack. They just stood there in the shallow water, watching, waiting. "What do they want?" Jim whispered. The largest one, I could tell it was the leader somehow just from the way it held itself, opened its mouth. The sound that came out was the singing we'd heard the night before, but up close it was physical. I could feel it in my bones, in my teeth, in my skull. It was trying to get inside my head. "Come to the water. Come to us. It's time to join the others. Time to feed the bog." Jim took a step forward. His gun dropped from his hand. "Jim!" I grabbed him, but he was strong, stronger than he should have been. He pulled away from me, walking toward the creatures like a man in a dream. I did the only thing I could think of. I hit him, punched him hard in the jaw. He went down, blinked, looked at me with confused eyes. "Stay down," I said. "Don't listen to them." The creatures were coming closer. 3 feet from the shore now, 2 feet. Their eyes never blinked, never looked away. I reached into my pack and pulled out my flint and steel. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped them. The creatures were at the water's edge now, starting to pull themselves onto dry land. I struck the flint. Once. Twice. On the 3rd strike, I got a spark. It caught on the tinder bundle, dried grass and birch bark I always carried. The flame was small at first, just a glow. But it grew. The creatures stopped. their heads all swiveled toward the flame. And for the first time, I saw something in those alien eyes that I recognized. Fear. I fed the fire quickly, adding twigs, then branches. The flames grew higher. The creatures backed away, sliding back into the water. But they didn't leave. They stayed just beyond the firelight, watching, waiting. "We need more wood," I told Jim. "A lot more. And we need it to last until morning." It was going to be a long night. We gathered every piece of dry wood within 50 feet of our fire. Dead branches, fallen logs, even some of the peat from the bog edge. It burned slow and smoky, but it burned. Jim had snapped out of whatever trance the singing had put him in, but he kept looking toward the water with blank eyes. "Don't look at them," I said. "Keep your eyes on the fire." "They're in my head, Robert. I can feel them. They're showing me things." "What things?" "The deep places, the cold dark where they sleep. They've been here since the glaciers came. Millions of years, maybe longer. When the ice melted and everything else died or moved on, they stayed. The bog is perfect for them. Cold water, acidic, preserves their food. They hunt maybe once a year, drag people down, store them in the deep water. The acid keeps the bodies from rotting, a larder that lasts forever." "How do you know this?" "They're telling me. They want me to understand before they take me." I threw more wood on the fire. The flames shot up, bright orange in the darkness. Beyond the light, I could see shapes moving in the water. More than 6 now. Maybe a dozen. Maybe more. "The survival group," I said. I found the bones. The old ones, preserved in the peat. That's what made the creatures notice them." Jim nodded slowly. "The bones were marked. Territory markers. And when Marcus and the others dug them up, moved them around, it was like vandalizing a grave. The creatures got angry." "So this is revenge?" "No. This is just feeding. They're always hungry. They take what they can get, usually 1 or 2 people a year, hikers who wander too close, hunters who don't listen to the warnings. But 6 people together? That's a feast. They're not going to let us leave." Around midnight, Jim stood up. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I have to go to them." "Sit down. You don't understand. They're calling me. They need me. The water needs me." He started walking toward the shore. I tackled him. We fought in the dirt at the edge of the firelight. He was strong, but I was desperate. I pinned him down, tied his hands with paracord from my pack. "I'm sorry," I said, "but you're not going anywhere." He didn't struggle after that, just lay there, staring at the water with tears running down his face. "They're beautiful," he whispered. "You can't see it, but they're beautiful. Older than us, smarter than us. We're just food to them, and that's okay. That's the natural order. We should be honored." "That's not you talking." "Yes, it is. This is the clearest I've ever thought in my life." I checked my watch. It was working again somehow. 3 a.m., 5 more hours until sunrise. The fire was burning low. I added more wood, but we were running out. Another 2 hours, maybe 3, and we'd have nothing left to burn. The creatures knew it too. They were getting closer, testing the edge of the firelight. I could see them clearly now, their armored plates gleaming wet, their multiple legs moving with a grace that should have been impossible for something so large. One of them opened its mouth, and I saw the spiral of teeth, saw how they were designed to grip and hold and pull prey underwater. At 4 a.m., I made a decision. "Jim," I said, "I'm going to run. When I do, the creatures will follow me. You stay by the fire. When the sun comes up, you head north. Don't stop until you reach the road. They'll kill you. Maybe. But you'll get out. Someone has to tell people what's down here." "Robert, you can't—" I didn't let him finish. I grabbed a burning branch from the fire, took a deep breath, and ran toward the water. The creatures reacted immediately. They came out of the bog, all of them, a dozen nightmares made of chitin and hunger and ancient malice. But they kept their distance from my torch. I ran along the shore, waving the burning branch, keeping them focused on me. They followed, moving faster than anything that size should move. Their legs ate up the ground, their heads tracking me with those horrible eyes. I led them away from Jim, away from the fire. And then, when I was far enough away, I threw the torch into the water. The light went out instantly. I was alone in the dark with creatures that had been hunting in this bog since before humans existed. I felt them surround me, felt the water rising around my feet as they came closer, smelled something ancient and rotten, like the bottom of a well that had been sealed for centuries. "Come on," I said. "You want food? Here I am." The largest one came at me first. I saw its mouth open, saw the teeth spiraling inward, saw my death approaching. And then I pulled out my magnesium fire starter and the emergency flare from my pack. I struck the magnesium with the back of my knife. It sparked white-hot, bright enough to hurt my eyes. The creatures screamed, a sound like metal scraping on stone. I lit the flare, and it blazed red and brilliant, burning at 3,000 degrees. I jabbed it at the nearest creature. The flare touched its plated armor, and the armor caught fire. Chitin burns. I knew that from studying insects. And these things were basically giant amphibious arthropods. Hair armor was their weakness. The creature thrashed, rolling in the shallow water, but the water couldn't put out a magnesium flare. The fire spread plate to plate until the whole thing was blazing. It screamed and finally disappeared into the deep water. The others backed away. But they didn't leave. They were regrouping, preparing for another attack. I had maybe 30 seconds before the flare burned out. I ran back toward Jim, toward the fire. The creatures followed, but they kept their distance from the burning flare. I made it back to the campsite just as the flare sputtered and died. Jim was where I'd left him, tied up, crying. I cut him loose. "We have to hold them off until dawn," I said. 2 more hours. Can you do that?" He nodded, wiping his eyes. Whatever hold they'd had on his mind was breaking. 2 hours. We can do 2 hours. We fed the fire everything we had left. Our packs, our spare clothes, even our boots when we ran out of wood. The flames grew higher, brighter. The creatures circled us just beyond the light, waiting. At 6 a.m., the eastern sky started to turn gray. The creatures began to retreat, sliding back into the water. But the largest one, the leader, stayed. It watched us with those 6 eyes, patient and eternal. As the sun broke the horizon, it spoke. Not with words, but I understood it anyway. A thought pressed into my mind, heavy and cold. We have always been here. We will always be here. You may leave today, but the water remembers you, and we are patient. Then it slipped beneath the surface and was gone. We walked out of Cranberry Wilderness on September 18, 1981. It took us 6 hours to reach the road. Neither of us spoke. What was there to say? The authorities found the bodies of all 6 survival students over the next week. The official report said they'd been killed by a combination of drowning and animal attacks, probably a bear, though the wounds didn't quite match any known bear species. The bog area was closed to the public, designated as unstable wetland with dangerous wildlife present. Jim quit the Ranger Service a month later. Last I heard, he moved to Arizona, desert country, no water for miles. I stayed on for another year trying to make sense of what we'd seen. I read everything I could find about the bog, scientific papers, Native American folklore, old journals from settlers. The pieces started to fit together. The Cranberry Glades were created at the end of the last ice age about 12,000 years ago. Glacial retreat left behind these pockets of Arctic ecosystem in the middle of West Virginia. The plants adapted from Ice Age species. The animals, too. It made sense that predators would adapt as well. The Cherokee had dozens of stories about water monsters in the area. They called them different names, but the descriptions were similar. Large, many-legged, intelligent, older than memory. The Cherokee left offerings at the bogs to appease them, never hunted near the water, and warned their children to stay away. White settlers dismissed these warnings as superstition. Over the centuries, people disappeared near the bogs. Hunters, hikers, occasionally whole groups. The disappearances were chalked up to natural causes, people getting lost, falling through thin ice, drowning in the acidic water. But I knew better now. I'd seen what lived in the deep water, and I knew it was still there, waiting. I left the Ranger Service in 1982, moved to Nevada, worked in Death Valley for a while. Anywhere without standing water. Anywhere the ground was dry and hot and nothing could hide beneath the surface. I'm telling you this story now because you need to know. Climate change is raising the water levels in the bogs. Warmer temperatures are expanding wetland habitats. And places like Cranberry Glades, these ancient refuges from the Ice Age, are growing. The creatures are waking up, all of them, in bogs and swamps and lakes across the country, in pockets of ancients. And water that have been isolated for millennia, things that should have died with the glaciers, are stirring. Last month, 6 hikers disappeared in the Okefenokee Swamp in Georgia. 3 weeks ago, a fishing party vanished in the Boundary Waters in Minnesota. 2 weeks ago, searchers found strange tracks, 18 inches long, 5-toed with webbing, along the shore of a bog in Maine. The Cherokee were right. We should have listened. The water remembers, and it's hungry. If you're planning to hike near wetlands, please stay away from the water. Don't camp near bogs or swamps. Don't go in after dark. And if you hear singing that sounds like someone you love calling your name, don't listen. Whatever you do, don't go to the water. Because some things have been waiting in the dark places since before we learned to stand upright, and they've got all the time in the world. My name is Jonathan Stormridge, and I've spent 20 years pulling bodies out of these mountains. That's what park rangers do in places like Blackwater Falls. We find the hikers who went off trail, the kayakers who thought they could handle Class 5 rapids, the tourists who got too close to the edge. In 2 decades, I've recovered 31 drowning victims from the Blackwater River system. You'd think I'd be used to death by now. I grew up in Charleston, joined the Army right out of high school, did 2 tours overseas that I don't talk about much. When I came back, I needed somewhere quiet. Somewhere the only thing you had to worry about was whether you packed enough rope and if the weather would hold. The Monongahela National Forest seemed like the perfect place to forget about the ugliness I'd seen. The locals used to tell stories about the river. Old-timers sitting outside the general store in Davis would warn me about the deep pools below the falls. There's something down there that don't like visitors, they'd say, voices low and serious. Been that way since the war. They meant World War II. There'd been a German POW camp near here, tucked away in the mountains where nobody could see it. Most of those prisoners went home in 1945. But the stories stuck around. I never believed any of it. Water devils, river monsters. It was all just mountain folklore. People needed explanations for why experienced swimmers drowned in calm water, why boats sometimes capsized for no reason. The truth was simpler and sadder. The Blackwater is dangerous. The current is stronger than it looks, the rocks are slippery, and the water stays cold enough to give you hypothermia even in summer. That's all the explanation you need. April 1983 hit us hard. The winter had been brutal, and when spring came, all that snow melted at once. The river swelled to twice its normal size, churning brown, with mud and debris. The 62-foot waterfall that gives the park its name roared like a freight train. You could hear it from miles away. That's when we got the call about Marcus Chen. Marcus was a local, 34 years old, one of the best kayakers in the state. He'd run the Blackwater dozens of times, knew every rock and eddy. When his wife reported him missing, we figured he'd gotten cocky, tried to run the falls during flood stage. It happened sometimes, good paddlers who thought they were better than the river. We found his kayak first, wedged between 2 boulders about a quarter-mile downstream from the falls. The boat was intact, no cracks or holes. That was strange. Usually when someone goes over in high water, their boat gets smashed to pieces. Then we found Marcus. My partner Rodriguez and I were doing a grid search along the riverbank, working our way through thick brush and mud. I almost stepped on him. He was lying face down in an eddy, water barely 6 inches deep. I've seen a lot of drowning victims, but something about this one made my stomach turn. "Rodriguez," I called out. "Got him." We rolled him over carefully, and that's when I saw the wounds. 3 massive gashes ran across Marcus's chest. each one deep enough to see bone. They were clean cuts, not ragged like you'd get from hitting rocks. And they were parallel, evenly spaced, like something with claws had taken a swipe at him. "What the hell did that?" Rodriguez whispered. I shook my head. I'd seen snapping turtle bites before, even tangled with a big muskie once that had bitten a swimmer. This wasn't either of those things. The wounds were too large, too powerful. We called it in, got the body transported to the county coroner. I wrote up my report, stuck to the facts. Experienced kayaker found deceased, cause unknown, possible animal attack. I didn't mention that the water where we found him was 20 degrees colder than the rest of the river. I didn't mention that there were no defensive wounds on his hands, like he'd never tried to fight off whatever attacked him. And I definitely didn't mention the smell. A thick, prehistoric stink of mud and decay that seemed to cling to Marcus's body, even though he'd only been in the water for a few hours. The coroner's report came back 3 days later, and it didn't make any sense. Massive trauma to the chest cavity, Dr. Yates told me over the phone. She sounded tired, like she'd been up all night trying to figure this out. But here's the weird part, Jonathan. He was already dead when he hit the water. No water in his lungs. Whatever killed him did it on land, or at least while he was still breathing air. "What about the wounds?" I asked. She paused. "I've sent photos to wildlife experts at the university. Nobody can identify what made them. The spacing suggests something with a large paw, bigger than a bear, which doesn't make sense, and there's something else." "What?" "He's missing about 40% of his blood volume, not from the chest wounds. Those bled, but not enough. It's like something drained him." I hung up feeling sick. This was supposed to be a simple drowning. Now we had something that killed on land, dragged bodies into the water, and took their blood. The park superintendent wanted to close the river, but the spring tourist season was just starting. He compromised. We'd put up warning signs and increase patrols. Rodriguez and I were assigned to monitor the gorge area, where the water runs deepest and fastest. That's where we met Sarah Blackwood. She was standing at the edge of the main overlook, staring down at the falls with an intensity that made me nervous. People came here to take pictures, to feel that spray on their faces. Sarah looked like she was searching for something. "Ma'am," I called out, approaching slowly. "You need to stay behind the railing." She turned, and I saw she was probably in her 70s, with white hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her eyes were sharp, clear, the kind of eyes that didn't miss much. "You're the ranger who found Marcus Chen," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. Did you know him?" "I know what killed him." She said it matter-of-factly, like she was telling me the weather forecast. "Same thing that's lived in these pools since 1944. Same thing that took my brother when we were children." My hand instinctively went to my radio. We got plenty of strange people in the parks. Folks who thought Bigfoot lived in every shadow or aliens had built the rock formations. But something about Sarah's calm certainty made my skin crawl. "Ma'am, I think you should—" "The Germans did experiments," she interrupted, "at the POW camp. They weren't just holding prisoners there. They were doing research, biological research on the local wildlife. My father worked at the camp as a guard. He told me before he died that they'd created something that got loose in the river when the camp closed." "That's quite a story," I said carefully. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph, old and yellowed with age. It showed a young boy, maybe 10 years old, standing by the river with a fishing pole. He was grinning at the camera. "That's Bobby," Sarah said softly. "Summer of 1950. We were fishing below the falls, just like we'd done 100 times before. The water was calm, barely moving. He waded out to his waist to cast his line, and something grabbed him. Pulled him under so fast I didn't even have time to scream." She looked up at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. "They never found his body. Said he probably got stuck under a rock, got swept downstream. But I saw it, Ranger Stormridge. I saw something huge and dark rise up under him. I saw the water turn red." "I'm sorry for your loss," I said, meaning it. "But these stories are true," she finished. "And if you keep ignoring them, more people are going to die." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing there with a photograph of a dead boy and a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. That night, Rodriguez and I did a patrol of the gorge trails. We carried high-powered flashlights and radios, standard procedure. The moon was almost full, bright enough to cast shadows through the trees. "You believe any of that stuff the old lady was saying?" Rodriguez asked as we hiked down toward the water. "No," I said automatically, but I wasn't sure I meant it. We reached the river's edge just after midnight. The water was still high from the snowmelt, moving fast and dark. I swept my flashlight across the surface, watching for debris or anything unusual. That's when I saw the fish. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, floating belly up in a small eddy near the shore. They were all the same species, smallmouth bass, good-sized ones, 3 or 4 pounds each. Every single one of them was dead. "What the hell?" Rodriguez knelt down, scooping one up with his hand. "Fish kill? Pollution?" I checked the water with my temperature gauge. 48 degrees, cold but not unusual for April. The fish looked intact, no obvious injuries or disease. Then Rodriguez turned his flashlight downstream, and we both froze. Something was moving in the water about 50 yards away. Something big, creating a wake like a submarine. It was too large to be a fish, too smooth to be debris. It moved deliberately, purposefully, cutting across the current like the river wasn't even there. "Jonathan," Rodriguez whispered. "Are you seeing this?" "Yeah," I breathed. The thing dove, and for a moment the water went perfectly still. Then from somewhere deep below the surface we heard a sound, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the rocks beneath our feet. Rodriguez and I looked at each other, and without saying a word, we both started backing away from the shore. We didn't stop moving until we reached the parking lot. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 5 years. I couldn't. It faced the river yet, couldn't shake the image of that massive shape cutting through the water. Instead, I drove to the county library and started digging through old records. The POW camp had been called Camp Allegheny. It operated from 1943 to 1945, holding mostly German officers and scientists captured in North Africa. The official records were sparse. Prisoner counts, transfer dates, nothing interesting. But tucked in a folder of local newspaper clippings, I found something that made my blood run cold. Mysterious deaths at local camp. Davis Gazette, August 1944. Local authorities are investigating the deaths of 3 prisoners at Camp Allegheny last week. Camp officials claim the men drowned while attempting to escape via the Blackwater River, but family members of one victim are disputing this account. "My son was a champion swimmer," said Mrs. Helena Schmidt in a letter received by this paper. "He would not have drowned in a river." The Army has declined further comment. There was more. A report from 1945 about the camp being decommissioned and sanitized before closure. Another article from 1946 mentioning that several buildings at the campsite had been burned to the ground, with officials citing safety concerns. And then, scattered through the years, drowning after drowning after drowning, at least one per year, sometimes more. Always in the same stretch of river, always below the falls. Bodies sometimes found, sometimes not. The pattern was there, if you knew to look for it. My phone rang. Rodriguez. "Jonathan, we've got another one. You need to get down here." I made it to the river in 15 minutes. This time it was a park volunteer named Tommy Pierce, 22 years old, fresh out of college. He'd been checking trail conditions near the gorge. His body was lying on the rocks at the water's edge, and it was worse than Marcus Chen. Much worse. Tommy's chest had been torn open, ribs exposed. But that wasn't what made me turn away, fighting nausea. His internal organs were gone, heart, lungs, liver, all removed with surgical precision. The body cavity was empty, clean, like someone had scooped him out. "Jesus Christ," Rodriguez said, his voice shaking. "What are we dealing with?" I couldn't answer. I was staring at something I'd spotted on the rocks near Tommy's body. Long scratches, gouged deep into the stone, and in between those scratches, caught on the rough surface, were scales. They were each the size of a dinner plate, translucent and slimy, with an oily rainbow sheen. I picked one up carefully. It was still slightly warm. "We need to call the FBI," Rodriguez said. "This is way beyond park jurisdiction." "No." The word came out harder than I intended. "Not yet. We need to know what we're dealing with first." "We're dealing with a serial killer who's really good at making it look like animal attacks," Rodriguez said. "What else would it be?" I showed him the scale. Serial killers don't shed. That afternoon, I convinced the superintendent to let me organize a dive team. We'd search the deep pools below the falls, look for evidence, maybe even find where Tommy and Marcus had been killed. I didn't mention that I was really looking for something alive. Rodriguez and I geared up at sunset, along with 2 other certified divers, Martinez, a young ranger from the next district over, and Cole, a grizzled old-timer who'd been diving these rivers for 30 years. We had underwater cameras, powerful lights, and enough rope to map the entire underwater cave system we knew existed below the falls. "Stay in pairs," I instructed. "Nobody goes anywhere alone. We see anything unusual, we surface immediately. This is reconnaissance only." The water was brutally cold, even through our dry suits. My breath echoed loud in my ears as we descended into the main pool. The visibility was terrible, maybe 10 feet, with particles of silt and organic matter swirling in our lights. Martinez and I took the left side of the pool, moving slowly along the rock face. The gorge walls continued underwater, dropping down into darkness that our lights couldn't penetrate. I checked my depth gauge. We were at 40 feet now, and the bottom still wasn't visible. Something brushed against my leg. I spun, light cutting through the murk, but there was nothing there, just water and shadows. Martinez pointed at something ahead, and we swam closer. It was an opening in the rock wall, a cave entrance about 6 feet wide. We approached carefully, and I felt the current change. Water was flowing into the cave, pulling us gently toward the darkness. I motioned to Martinez. "Stay here. I'm going to look." She shook her head firmly. "No way. We go together." We entered the cave side by side, lights sweeping back and forth. The passage opened up almost immediately into a larger chamber. And that's when we saw them. Bodies. Not fresh ones. These were old, reduced to skeletons and scraps of clothing. They were arranged along the cave walls, 5 or 6 of them, positioned carefully like someone had put them there on purpose. Some still had remnants of uniforms attached, German uniforms. Martinez grabbed my arm, pointing frantically at something behind me. I turned and my light caught it for just a second. Something massive moving deeper in the cave. Not swimming, crawling, with powerful limbs that gripped the rocks. Then my light went out. So did Martinez's. We were in absolute darkness, 40 feet underwater, in a cave with something that had just killed 2 people. I could hear my heart hammering, each beat so loud I was sure the creature could hear it too. Something touched my shoulder, Martinez I hoped, and started pulling me backward. I kicked, following blindly, praying we were heading toward the exit and not deeper into the cave. Light suddenly bloomed around us. We'd made it out of the cave, back at Sens, onto the main pool. Rodriguez and Cole were there, their lights like beacons in the murk. They looked terrified. Rodriguez pointed up urgently. "Surface now." We kicked hard, racing for the surface. My depth gauge read 30 feet, 20, 10. I could see moonlight rippling above us. That's when something grabbed Martinez. She was beside me 1 second, gone the next, yanked backward and down so fast she didn't even have time to scream. I saw her light spiraling away into the depths, getting smaller and smaller. Rodriguez grabbed me, physically dragged me upward. We broke the surface, gasping, Cole right behind us. "Where's Martinez?" Cole shouted. "Gone," Rodriguez said. "Something took her." We scrambled onto the rocks, tearing off our masks. I was shaking so hard I could barely undo my weight belt. "We have to go back for her," I said. "No," Cole said flatly. "We'd just be throwing more lives away." He was right, and I hated him for it. We stood there on the rocks, staring at the water, waiting for Martinez to surface, waiting for bubbles for her light to reappear, for any sign she was alive. Instead, after about 5 minutes, we saw bubbles form on the surface, lots of them, rising in a cluster. They spelled out a word, clear and deliberate. "Leave." "Oh my God," Rodriguez whispered. The bubbles dissipated. The water went still. And Martinez never came up. I sat in my truck all night, watching the river, waiting for dawn. Rodriguez and Cole had gone back to make reports, to call Martinez's family, to start the impossible process of explaining what happened. I couldn't face any of that yet. Sarah Blackwood found me there at sunrise. She climbed into my passenger seat without asking, carrying a thermos of coffee and a thick folder of documents. "Now will you listen?" she asked gently. I took the coffee with shaking hands. "Tell me everything." She opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of military documents, scientific papers written in German, photographs of creatures that looked like salamanders, but were wrong somehow, too large, too intelligent, looking. The Germans were working on something called Project Molch, Sarah explained. Molch means newt in German. They were trying to create an amphibious soldier, something that could breathe both air and water, that could survive in any environment. They used the local hellbender salamanders as a base. They're already the largest salamander species in North America, grow up to 2 feet long. She showed me a photograph of a normal hellbender. It looked prehistoric, with wrinkled skin and a flat head. But they didn't stop at 2 feet, Sarah continued. They used radiation, genetic manipulation, techniques we still don't fully understand. By the time the camp closed in 1945, they'd created something 20 feet long, maybe bigger. Something with human-level intelligence and a massive appetite. Why didn't they destroy it? I asked. They tried, but it escaped into the river system, found the cave networks, learned to hunt. The Germans who knew about it were mostly dead by the end of the war. The few survivors kept their mouths shut. Nobody wanted to admit to war crimes, especially not ones this insane. I looked at the photographs again. In one image, taken through what looked like a thick glass window, I could see something large and dark in a flooded tank. Its eyes were visible, forward-facing, predatory, almost human in their awareness. "It's been down there for almost 40 years, I said. "Killing people." "Not many," Sarah said. "Maybe 1 or 2 a year. Enough to survive, but not enough to draw too much attention. It's smart enough for that, but something's changed recently. Maybe it's getting old, getting desperate, or maybe—" She paused. "Maybe it's getting ready to reproduce." The thought made me sick. One of these things was nightmare enough. A whole colony of them. My radio crackled. "All units, we have a situation at the campground. Multiple calls. About something large in the water. Campers are reporting a creature on the shore." I looked at Sarah. "It's hunting in daylight now." "It's not afraid anymore," she said. "It knows you. Can't stop it." I grabbed my rifle from the gun rack, a .308 with enough stopping power to drop a bear, and drove to the campground with my lights flashing. Sarah came with me, refusing to be left behind. The campground was chaos. Families were loading into cars, people were screaming, kids were crying. I spotted Rodriguez trying to calm people down, but everyone was pointing at the river. Something was standing in the shallows. It was massive, at least 20 feet from nose to tail, with 4 powerful legs ending in claws that gouged the mud. Its skin was mottled brown and gray, covered in thick armor-like scales. The head was flat and wide, with a mouth that could easily swallow a person whole. Along its sides were feathery gills that pulsed with each breath. But the worst part was its eyes. They were intelligent, calculating. It was watching us, studying us, like a general planning an attack. "Everyone back to the parking lot," I shouted. "Move now!" The creature took a step forward, water streaming off its body. It opened its mouth, and a sound came out. That same deep rumble we'd heard before, but louder, more threatening. I raised my rifle, aimed for its head, and fired. The bullet hit. I saw the impact. But the creature didn't even flinch. The armored scales were too thick. It just looked at me, tilted its head slightly, and then turned and slid back into the water. "It was testing us," Sarah said quietly, "seeing what weapons we have." "Then we need bigger weapons," Rodriguez said. He looked at me. "Jonathan, we can't fight that thing. We need to evacuate the entire area, call in the military, seal off this whole section of forest. By the time they get here, it'll be gone," I said. "Back to its caves. where we can't reach it, and it'll just keep killing, keep hunting, until someone stops it. You're talking about going after it, Rodriguez said. That's suicide. Martinez is still down there, I said quietly. Maybe alive, maybe not. But I'm not leaving her in that cave. Sarah put a hand on my arm. There's one thing the Germans learned. The creature needs a specific water temperature to survive, between 38 and 50 degrees. Too cold and it goes dormant. Too hot and its metabolism fails. That's why it stays in the deep pools, in the cave system where the temperature is constant. An idea was forming in my mind. Crazy, desperate, but maybe possible. The cave system connects to an underground hot spring, I said. I've seen it on the geological surveys. If we could trigger the spring, flood the caves with hot water, you'd cook it, Sarah finished, or force it to surface where you can fight it on your terms. How do we trigger the spring? Rodriguez asked. Explosives, I said. Enough to crack the rock layer separating the spring from the caves. That's insane, Rodriguez said, but he was already reaching for his radio. I'll call the mine rescue team in Elkins. They have access to demolition equipment. It took 6 hours to set up. The mine rescue team brought shaped charges and drilling equipment, and we worked into the night, setting explosive charges at 3 points above the cave system. The geology team confirmed our theory. A thin layer of limestone was all that separated the caves from a geothermal spring that registered at 92 degrees. I geared up for one final dive. Someone had to go down and plant a beacon, something to draw the creature away from the deepest parts of the cave before we blew the charges. Someone had to make sure Martinez wasn't still alive down there. It had to be me. You've got 30 minutes, Rodriguez said, checking my air tanks. Then we blow the charges whether you're out or not. Understood. I entered the water at midnight, alone, with nothing but a flashlight and a small waterproof beacon that would emit a loud sonar ping. The theory was simple. The creature would be drawn to the sound, investigate, and I'd lead it toward the cave entrance before the charges went off. The descent was terrifying. Every shadow could be the creature. Every current shift could be its approach. I reached the cave entrance and swam inside, moving fast, following the route Martinez and I had taken before. The bodies were still there, German soldiers from 80 years ago, arranged like trophies. And beyond them, deeper in the cave, I heard movement. Something large, breathing air, scraping against rock. I activated the beacon. The ping echoed through the water, loud and insistent. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I felt it, a surge of current as something massive started moving toward me. I turned and kicked hard, racing back toward the entrance. The creature burst out of the darkness behind me, and I got my first clear look at it. It was even bigger than I'd thought, filling the entire tunnel, moving with terrifying speed. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of small, sharp teeth designed for gripping prey underwater. I kicked harder, lungs burning, muscles screaming. The cave entrance was ahead, just 20 feet, 10 feet. Something grabbed my ankle. I looked down and saw claws, each one as long as my hand, wrapped around my leg. The creature was pulling me backward, reeling me in like a fish. I twisted, grabbed the small emergency oxygen tank from my belt, the one meant for emergency ascents, and jammed the valve release right into the creature's face. High-pressure oxygen exploded out, blasting directly into its eyes and gills. The creature released me, thrashing in pain and confusion. I kicked free and shot out of the cave entrance just as my radio crackled. Charges in 5, 4, 3. I kicked upward with everything I had. The surface was impossibly far away, and I could feel the creature behind me recovering, giving chase. 2. 1. The world turned white. The shock wave hit me like a hammer, tossing me upward and set sideways. My ears rang, my vision blurred. For a moment I couldn't tell which way was up. Then hands were grabbing me, pulling me onto rocks, Rodriguez and Cole hauling me out of the water. I ripped off my mask, gasping. "Did it work?" I coughed out. Rodriguez pointed at the river. The water was churning, boiling, steam rising in thick clouds. The cave system had collapsed, and hot spring water was flooding the entire gorge, raising the temperature of the main pool by degrees every second. And then the creature surfaced. It was thrashing, clearly in pain, its body unable to handle the sudden heat. It crawled onto the rocks, moving sluggishly, its armored skin starting to blister. I grabbed my rifle. This time I didn't aim for the armored scales. I aimed for its eyes, its open mouth, the soft tissue of its throat. I emptied the entire magazine. The creature shuddered, let out one final rumbling groan, and went still. We stood there for a long time, rifles raised, waiting for it to move again. It didn't. "Is it dead?" Cole asked. "I don't know," I admitted, "but it's not getting back up anytime soon." Rodriguez was staring at the water. "Jonathan, Martinez's body. We never found her." I knew what he was thinking. If she was still in the caves, she'd been incinerated when the charges went off. "We'll search at first light," I said quietly. "But right now, we need to secure this area and call in every authority we have." The Army arrived 12 hours later with a containment team. They cordoned off the entire gorge, declared it a hazardous material site, and removed the creature's body under armed guard. They found Martinez's body in the caves, what was left of it. We held a small service at the park, and I stood there thinking about how she'd died doing her job, trying to help people, just like we all did. The official report called it an aggressive giant salamander, likely a mutated specimen due to environmental contamination. The Army sealed all the caves, drained the hot spring back to safe levels, and posted guards at the site for 6 months. They never mentioned Project Mulk. They never talked about Nazi experiments or genetically modified creatures. The story was simple. Dangerous wildlife, unfortunate deaths, area now safe. But I know the truth, and I know something else they didn't put in any report. When they removed the creature's body, I watched them load it into a refrigerated truck. As they closed the doors, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The creature had been dead for less than a day, but there were already signs of regeneration. The bullet wounds in its throat were starting to close. The burned skin was showing new scale growth underneath. It wasn't quite dead. Maybe it couldn't fully die. I requested a transfer 3 days later. They sent me to Death Valley, about as far from water as you can get in the United States. I still work as a ranger, but I never go near rivers or lakes. Can't even take a bath anymore. Showers only, and quick ones. Rodriguez quit the service entirely. Last I heard, he'd moved to Arizona and was working as a teacher. Cole retired, sold his house, and moved to Alaska. None of us talk about what happened. What would be the point? But sometimes, late at night, I think about what Sarah told me before she left. The Germans had set up multiple research facilities throughout Appalachia during the war, using the remote locations and deep caves for experiments they couldn't conduct in Europe. Project Mulk was just one of them. "How many other sites were there?" I'd asked her. She'd shown me a map. There were 12 red dots scattered across West Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee, 12 locations where the Germans had run their programs. "We only know about half of them," she'd said. "The rest are still out there, still operating in a way. The things they created are still alive, still hunting, still growing." I keep that map in my desk drawer. Sometimes I take it out and stare at it, wondering what's living in those other locations. Wondering if other rangers, other families, other communities are dealing with creatures they can't explain. And I wonder if I should try to warn them, or if it's better not to know. Because once you've seen what I've seen, once you understand what humans are capable of creating, you can't ever look at the world the same way again. The water looks different now. Every shadow is a threat. Every unusual ripple makes me reach for my radio. And every time I hear about an unexplained drowning, about strange creatures in remote locations, about people who saw something they can't explain, I think about that creature in the Blackwater River Gorge. And I wonder how many more are out there, waiting in the deep water, patient and hungry. They say the Blackwater Falls area is safe now. They've reopened the campground, removed the warning signs, and the tourists are back, taking their selfies at the overlook. But I know better. Some things you can't kill, no matter how many bullets you use or how many charges you detonate. Some mistakes don't die, they just wait. And if you ever find yourself hiking near an old WW2 facility near deep water in a remote gorge, and you see something that doesn't quite make sense, something too large, too intelligent, too wrong, then do what I should have done from the beginning. Leave. Don't try to investigate. Don't try to prove it's not real. Just pack up your gear, get in your car, and drive as far away as you can, because some stories are true, and some monsters are real. My name is Margaret Thornwood, and I've spent 15 years studying plants in these West Virginia mountains. I have a doctorate in botany, I've published papers, I've discovered 3 new species of wildflowers that science didn't even know existed. I keep a seed bank to preserve endangered plants. I'm a scientist. I deal in facts, data, observable reality. The old-timers around New River Gorge used to tell stories about a witch at Cataract Falls. They said she could make plants grow with just a whisper, that she tended a garden where human bones fed the flowers, that she'd been hanged back in the 1800s but never really died. I smiled and nodded when they told these stories. Folklore, I thought. Mountain superstition passed down through generations. Nothing more. That was before August 1976, before the drought, before I found her garden. The summer hit us hard that year. By early August, we hadn't seen rain in 6 weeks. The forest was dying. Leaves turned brown and fell in the middle of summer. Streams dried to trickles, then to nothing. Even the hardiest plants were wilting, their roots searching desperately for water that wasn't there. I was worried about my research sites. Years of careful study, all potentially lost to one bad season. I hiked through my usual areas, documenting the damage, trying to save what I could. It was depressing work. Nature is resilient, but this drought was brutal. Then I got a call on my radio from 2 hikers. They'd gone off-trail exploring and found something strange near Cataract Falls, a section of forest that was still green. Impossibly green. Plants blooming like it was spring, they said. They thought maybe I'd want to check it out. Cataract Falls was 41 miles from the nearest road, deep in the gorge. You couldn't drive there. You couldn't even hike a normal trail. The only way down was rappelling off the cliff face. It was one of the most isolated spots in the park, perfect for rare plants that didn't like human disturbance. I'd been meaning to survey that area for years, but never found the time. This seemed like the perfect opportunity. If plants were thriving there during the drought, maybe there was an underground spring or unique microclimate, something worth documenting, maybe even something that could help me understand how to protect other areas. I called my graduate student, Kevin Chen, and asked if he wanted to come along. Kevin was 24, enthusiastic, and needed field experience for his thesis. He jumped at the chance. "How long will we be out there?" he asked. 3 days, maybe 4, I said. "It's a long trip in. We'll camp, collect specimens, take samples. Standard survey work." "Sounds great, Dr. Thornwood. I'll pack my gear." We left 2 days later on a Tuesday morning. The sky was flat and gray, promising rain that never came. We hiked for 6 hours just to reach the cliff edge above Cataract Falls. The waterfall itself was barely running, just a thin ribbon of water dropping into the gorge below. I set up the rappelling gear while Kevin checked our supplies. Rope, harnesses, climbing hardware, camping equipment, specimen bags, cameras, water testing kit, soil sample containers. Everything we needed for a proper scientific expedition. "You ever been down there before?" Kevin asked, peering over the edge. "No. Too remote. But that's what makes it interesting. Less human impact means plants behave more naturally." We rappelled down one at a time. It took 20 minutes to reach the bottom. When my feet hit the ground, I unclipped and looked around. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Rich, earthy, almost overwhelming, like walking into a greenhouse after rain. But it hadn't rained in weeks. The second thing I noticed was the sound, or rather, the lack of it. No birds, no insects, just the quiet trickle of the waterfall and the rustle of leaves in a breeze I couldn't feel. The third thing I noticed was the green. God, the green. Everything else in West Virginia was brown and dying, but here, Ferns uncurled in thick carpets. Wildflowers bloomed in impossible profusion. Vines draped from trees like curtains. The vegetation was so lush, so healthy, it looked like a different season, a different world. "This is incredible," Kevin whispered. I pulled out my field guide and started identifying species. Trillium, ladies' slipper orchids, ginseng, bloodroot, all rare, all endangered, all thriving. And they were arranged in patterns, not random patterns like you'd see in nature, deliberate patterns, geometric. The trillium formed a perfect circle. The orchids made a 5-pointed star. The ginseng grew in spirals. "Dr. Thornwood?" Kevin's voice had changed. Plants don't grow like this naturally, do they?" "No," I said slowly. "They don't." I knelt down to examine the soil. Dark, rich, full of nutrients. I dug my fingers in and felt something hard. I brushed away the dirt. A bone. Human. Part of a finger. I jerked my hand back. "Kevin, get the camera. We need to document this." I kept digging, more carefully now. More bones. Lots of them. Fragments of skull. Pieces of rib cage. A complete femur. All old, weathered, mixed thoroughly into the soil like fertilizer. My scientific brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe this was an old burial ground. Maybe Native Americans had used this site. Maybe. But I knew better. I knew what I was looking at. Someone had been gardening here. Someone had been using human remains to feed the plants. The old stories suddenly didn't seem so funny anymore. We set up camp near the waterfall, far from the Garden of Bones. Neither of us talked much. Kevin kept glancing at the plants, then looking away. I couldn't blame him. The more I looked, the more wrong everything seemed. The plants weren't just arranged in patterns, they were arranged in impossible patterns. Species that show, but never grow together, were thriving side by side. Acid-loving plants next to alkaline-loving plants. Sun plants in deep shade, shade plants in bright sun. Everything violating every rule I'd learned in 20 years of botany. "Maybe we should report this," Kevin said as we ate cold sandwiches for dinner. "Call the rangers, get forensics out here." "With what?" I gestured at my radio. "We're in a dead zone, no signal. We'd have to hike back out, and it took us 6 hours to get here. By the time we brought anyone back, it'd be another full day." "So what do? We document everything. Take samples, photos, measurements, build a case, then we hike out tomorrow and report it properly." Kevin nodded, but he didn't look relieved. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing sounds, rustling, scraping, like someone walking through dry leaves. But when I looked outside the tent, I saw nothing but plants swaying in a wind I couldn't feel. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and decided to review my photos on my camera. I clicked through the images I'd taken that day. The bone fragments, the geometric plant arrangements, the impossibly healthy vegetation. Then I stopped. In one photo, behind a cluster of ladies' slipper orchids, there was something else. Something I hadn't seen when I took the picture. A shadow. No, not a shadow. A figure. Translucent, barely visible, but definitely there. A woman in an old-fashioned dress, kneeling in the garden. My hands started shaking. I clicked to the next photo. Same spot, taken 5 seconds later. The figure was gone. I clicked through more images. In 3 other photos, I found her. Always in the background, always tending the plants, always barely visible, like she was made of mist. "Kevin," I whispered. "Kevin, wake up." He groaned and rolled over. "What?" "Look at this." I showed him the photos. He stared at the screen for a long time. Me. That's just a trick of the light, shadow patterns, our eyes seeing faces in random shapes." "In 4 different photos?" "Dr. Thornwood, you're tired. We're both tired. It's been a weird day. Let's just get some sleep and we'll figure this out in the morning." But I couldn't sleep. I lay in my sleeping bag listening to Kevin's breathing slow into the rhythm of sleep, and I thought about the stories, the witch trials of the 1840s, women executed for unnatural knowledge, for knowing too much about plants and healing, for making things grow when they shouldn't. What was her name? I tried to remember. The old-timers had mentioned it. Rebecca something. No, Ruth. Ruth Blackwood. They'd hanged her in 1847 for witchcraft. The charges were ridiculous. She'd grown vegetables in winter. She'd healed a child's fever with herbs. She'd known the names and uses of every plant in these mountains. So they'd killed her for it. I must have finally dozed off, because when I opened my eyes, gray dawn light was filtering through the tent. Kevin's sleeping bag was empty. "Kevin?" I called. No answer. I scrambled out of the tent. His boots were gone. His pack was still there, but his specimen bag and notebook were missing. I found his trail easily enough. Footprints in the soft earth leading straight toward the garden. I followed them into the thick vegetation. The plants seemed taller this morning, closer together. The paths between them narrower. "Kevin!" I shouted. "Where are you?" Still no answer. His footprints led me deeper into the garden, through the circles and spirals of arranged plants, past the bone-enriched soil. Then the footprints stopped. Just stopped. In the middle of a patch of carnivorous pitcher plants that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. The pitcher plants were huge, 3 feet tall, their cups wide enough to fit a human head, and they were moving, swaying, reaching. One of them had Kevin's notebook sticking out of it. I grabbed the notebook and yanked it free. The plant made a hissing sound and thick, sticky liquid splatters. It onto my arm. It burned. I wiped it off frantically with my sleeve. The notebook was wet, damaged, but I could still read Kevin's handwriting on the last page he'd written. "They're talking. The plants are talking. Not words. Pictures in my head. She wants me to understand. She wants me to help. The plants are dying everywhere. She's trying to save them. She needs..." The writing stopped mid-sentence. "Kevin!" I screamed. The pitcher plants swayed toward me. All of them, moving like they were reaching for me. I ran. I crashed through the garden, not caring about the research anymore, not caring about documentation or scientific method. I just ran. Behind me I heard something that sounded like laughter, high and thin and cold. I made it back to camp and grabbed my pack, my climbing gear. I was leaving. I was getting out of this gorge right now, and I was never coming back. But when I reached the cliff face where we'd rappelled down, my rope was gone. Both ropes. Gone. I looked up at the cliff edge, 200 feet of sheer rock face, impossible to climb without gear. I was trapped. I spent the next hour searching for the ropes. They had to be somewhere. We'd left them securely anchored at the top. Professional-grade equipment didn't just disappear. But they had. I radioed for help knowing it was useless. Static, just like I'd expected. The gorge was too deep, the rock too thick. No signal got in or out. I was alone in a place where plants grew in patterns, where bones fertilized the soil, and where my graduate student had vanished into a carnivorous plant that shouldn't exist in West Virginia. Think, Margaret. Think like a scientist. Kevin's notebook said the plants were communicating. That was impossible. Plants don't have nervous systems. They can't think. They can't talk. But I'd seen them move. I'd seen them reach for me. I sat down on a rock near the waterfall at Surya and forced myself to breathe slowly, to think through this rationally. Hypothesis. There was something unusual about this area. An unknown species of plant with unusual properties. Maybe something that produced hallucinogenic spores. That would explain the visions, the sense of communication Kevin described. But it didn't explain the bones, or the arranged patterns, or the missing ropes. I pulled out the photos again and studied the translucent figure, the woman in the old dress. If she was real, if Ruth Blackwood's spirit was somehow here, what did she want? According to the stories, She'd died trying to protect plants. She'd known their secrets, their uses, and when people got scared of that knowledge, they'd killed her. Now, 130 years later, was she still trying to protect them? A thought struck me. The drought. Plants dying across the entire region. But not here. Here, everything thrived. Was Ruth keeping them alive somehow? Was this garden a refuge for endangered species? And if that was true, what did she need Kevin for? Or me? I stood up and walked slowly back toward the garden. Every instinct screamed at me to stay away, but I had to find Kevin, and I had to understand what was happening. The plants had rearranged themselves since this morning. The paths were different. They led in a spiral now, pulling me toward the center of the garden where the oldest, largest plants grew. I followed the path because I had no choice. In the center, I found Kevin. He was kneeling in the soil, his hands buried up to the wrists, his eyes closed. Vines had wrapped around his arms. Thin roots had burrowed into his skin. He was breathing, but slowly. Too slowly. "Kevin!" I grabbed his shoulder and shook him. His eyes opened. They were green, not his normal brown. Bright, plant-like green. "She needs our help," he said. His voice sounded dreamy, distant. "The plants are dying, Dr. Thornwood. Everywhere. Humans are killing them, cutting them down, poisoning them, paving over them. She's trying to save the last ones, the rare ones, the special ones. Kevin, you're to making sense. We need to get you out of here. She wants you to understand." His green eyes focused on me. "You're a botanist. You study plants. You care about them. She thinks you'll help." "Help with what?" "Protecting them. Forever." The vines around his arms tightened. Kevin gasped. More roots pushed up through the soil, reaching for his legs, his torso. "No!" I grabbed the vines and tried to pull them off. They were strong as cables. When I yanked harder, they sliced my palms, drawing blood. Kevin smiled. "It doesn't hurt. It's actually peaceful. Like becoming part of something bigger. She says I'll live forever this way. As long as the plants survive, I'll survive." "That's not living, Kevin, that's—" A voice spoke, not out loud. Inside my head, clear as day. "He chose this. He understands." I spun around. The translucent woman stood 10 feet away, solid now, real. She wore a simple dress from the 1840s, homespun fabric, dirt-stained. Her hair was long and gray. Her face was stern, but not cruel. Ruth Blackwood, the witch of Cataract Falls. "Let him go," I said. He volunteered. The plants need guardians. Humans who understand their worth. Humans who will protect them when I cannot. "You're killing him." "No, I'm preserving him, like a seed in winter, waiting for spring. He'll be part of the garden, part of the cycle. And when humans finally drive these species to extinction everywhere else, here they will survive. In him, through him." "That's insane." Her expression hardened. "Insane? I'll tell you what's insane. Cutting down forests that took centuries to grow, poisoning rivers, paving paradise and putting up parking lots. Your species is committing suicide, and you call me insane?" She had a point. God help me, she had a point. But you can't just trap people. Use them as fertilizer. That's murder. I use only those who choose it, who understand the importance, and those who threaten my garden. Her eyes locked on mine. "Which are you, Margaret Thornwood? Guardian or threat?" More vines erupted from the soil around me. Pitcher plants rose from the earth, their mouths opening wide. The air filled with sweet, cloying scent that made my head swim. I stumbled backward, but the vines caught my ankles. They pulled tight, dropping me to the ground. "I'm a scientist," I shouted. "I study plants. I've dedicated my life to understanding them." "Then prove it." Prove you're worthy. The vines dragged me toward a cluster of bloodroot plants. Their white flowers looked innocent, but I knew their roots contained toxic alkaloids. In the right dose, medicine. In the wrong dose, poison. How? I gasped. How do I prove it? Answer me this. What is more important, one human life or the survival of a species? The vines pulled tighter. The bloodroot flowers opened, revealing red centers that looked like wounds, like eyes. I thought about my career, 15 years documenting endangered plants, writing papers that few people read, begging for funding to protect areas that would probably be logged anyway, fighting losing battles against developers and politicians who didn't care. I thought about the 3 species I'd discovered, how proud I'd been, how sure that my work mattered. But did it? In 100 years, would any of it matter? Or would all these plants be extinct? My research relegated to dusty archives, a record of beauty that no longer existed. The species, I whispered. The species is more important. The vines loosened. Ruth Blackwood smiled. Good. You understand. Now, will you help me protect this place? Will you ensure no humans disturb this garden? I looked at Kevin. His eyes were closed again. Roots covered half his body now. He was almost gone. If I say yes, will you let him go? He doesn't want to go, but I'll release you. You can leave this gorge, return to your work, and when you do, you'll make sure this area is protected, designated as a preserve, off limits to hikers and developers and everyone else. And if I don't? Then you join the garden, and I find someone else who will. It wasn't really a choice. I'll do it, I said. The vines released me. I stood up slowly, shaking, covered in dirt and blood from where the plants had cut me. Ruth Blackwood watched me with those ancient, knowing eyes. You made the right choice. Did I? I looked at Kevin, half consumed by the garden. What kind of scientist sacrifices a student? The kind who thinks beyond herself, the kind who sees the larger pattern. She gestured at the garden around us. Every plant here is endangered, some critically. In another decade, they'll exist nowhere else on Earth. Is one human life worth more than entire species? I wanted to argue, to say yes, human life was worth more. But I'd spent my whole career watching plants disappear. Forests cleared, wetlands drained, meadows paved. And for what? Strip malls, parking lots, developments with names like Whispering Pines built where actual whispering pines used to grow. How long have you been here? I asked quietly. Since they hanged me in 1847, I felt it happening, the destruction. Even then, even before industry really took hold. I saw what was coming, so I stayed, found ways to preserve what I could. By killing people, by accepting their sacrifice. Her voice was sharp. I don't hunt humans, Margaret, but when they come here, when they threaten my garden, yes, I use them, just as they'd use these plants without a second thought. Fair is fair. I thought about the bones in the soil. How many people had Ruth accepted over the years? The hikers who found this place, I said. The ones who reported it. Are they? They left safely. They didn't threaten the garden. Only observed and moved on. She tilted her head. Not everyone who comes here dies. Only those who refuse to help. Or those who try to destroy what I've built. And Kevin? Why him? He heard the plants calling. Some people can. Those who truly listen. She looked at him almost fondly. He understood what I was trying to do, and he chose to become part of it. I knelt beside Kevin. His breathing was so shallow I could barely see his chest move. Kevin? Can you hear me? His eyes opened, still that unnatural green. It's okay, Dr. Thornwood. Really. She showed me everything. The whole web of life. How it all connects. I'm not dying. I'm becoming something more. You're 24 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. To do what? Write papers nobody reads? Watch everything I care about die? He smiled. A peaceful, dreamy smile. This way, I matter. I protect something that can't protect itself. That's worth more than any career. I wanted to shake him, to make him see reason. But reason had left this place long ago. Maybe it had never been here at all. I stood and faced Ruth again. You said you'd let me leave. I want the ropes. I want to climb out of here. First, you make a promise. A binding promise. She moved closer. The plants around her swayed and bent, like courtiers bowing to a queen. You'll designate this entire area as a botanical preserve. You'll use your credentials, your research, your authority. You'll make sure no one ever comes here to threaten my garden. And if I do that, if I protect this place, you'll leave me alone? More than that. Her expression softened slightly. I'll be your ally. There are other places in these mountains, other gardens I tend, other rare plants that need protection. When you fight to save them, I'll help. I'll make sure those plants thrive. Together, we can preserve more than this one gorge. It was a devil's bargain, literally making a deal with a supernatural entity to protect endangered species. But what choice did I have? And more than that, what if she was right? What if this was the only way to save plants that would otherwise go extinct? Okay, I said. I promise. Ruth extended her hand. It looked solid, but when I took it, her skin felt like mist. Cold mist. The kind that seeps into your bones and never quite leaves. Sealed, she said. The ground beneath us shook. Plants erupted all around us, growing at impossible speed. Vines, ferns, flowers, all blooming at once, filling the air with pollen and perfume. I stumbled backward, coughing. When the pollen cleared, Ruth was gone, and my ropes were coiled neatly at the base of the cliff. I looked at Kevin one last time. The roots had covered everything except his face now. In another few hours, he'd be completely absorbed into the garden. I'm sorry, I whispered. Don't be, he said. His voice was faint, peaceful. Tell my parents. Tell them I found my purpose, that I'm happy. I wanted to say something else, something comforting. But there was nothing to say. So I gathered my gear and started climbing. The ascent took forever. My hands shook, my legs cramped. Twice I almost fell. But finally, hours later, I pulled myself over the edge of the cliff and collapsed on solid ground. The sky was still gray, still promising rain that wouldn't come. The forest around me was still brown and dying. But 41 miles away, in the deepest part of the gorge, a garden bloomed eternal. And a witch tended it, patient as stone. I reported Kevin as missing. Search teams looked for days but never found him. How could they? I made sure no one rappelled down into that particular section of the gorge. I told them the rock was unstable, that it was too dangerous. It took 6 months of paperwork, meetings, and political maneuvering, but I got what Ruth wanted. The entire Cataract Falls area was designated a protected botanical preserve. No hiking, no camping, no human access whatsoever. The official reason was to protect critically endangered plant species, which wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. I visit sometimes. I rappel down when no one's watching, and I check on the garden. It's always thriving, always growing. Kevin is still there, though you wouldn't know it to look. He's become part of the forest floor now, moss-covered, peaceful. Ruth appears. When I visit, we don't talk much. There's not much to say. But she keeps her promise. Other areas I fight to protect, other preserves I work to establish. The plants there thrive in ways that baffle other botanists. They call it the Thornwood effect. They write papers about my inexplicable success. If they only knew. I'm 40 now, 2 years older, 2 years wiser. I still do my research, still publish papers, still maintain my seed bank, but I'm more effective now. When I testify before Congress about endangered species, there's a weight to my words that wasn't there before. A certainty. People listen, because I know what I'm protecting. And I know the cost of failure. Last month, another hiker reported finding unusual plants near a waterfall in the Monongahela National Forest. Plants that shouldn't exist together. Plants arranged in geometric patterns. I know what that means. Ruth has another garden, maybe several. Other executed witches might be out there too, tending their own plots of rare earth. The mountains are old, and they keep their secrets well. I submitted the paperwork to protect that area yesterday. It'll go through. It always does now. At night, when I can't sleep, I think about Kevin, about his choice, about whether I'm complicit in murder or party to salvation. The line between the two feels thinner every year. And I think about Ruth's question, what's more important, one human life or the survival of a species? I still don't know the answer. Maybe there isn't one. But I made my choice. I made my promise. And in these mountains, promises to the dead are binding. The drought broke in September. Rain came hard and fast, flooding the gorge. But when I rappelled down to check on the garden, it was untouched, perfect, eternal. Ruth was there, tending her flowers. She didn't speak, just nodded, once, then faded into the mist. I climbed back out and continued my work. Because that's what you do when you make a deal with a witch. You honor it. You protect what needs protecting, and you never, ever speak of it. The plants need guardians, the rare ones, the precious ones, the species that can't survive the human world. So now they have me. And if that makes me complicit in something dark, so be it. The alternative is extinction. And I've seen enough species die to know that's worse than any ghost story. The old-timers were right about one thing. There is a witch at Cataract Falls. But they were wrong about another thing. She's not alone anymore. My name is William Crowthorne, and I've been a ranger in these Virginia mountains for 17 years now. That's long enough to know every trail, every cave entrance, every place where city folks get themselves into trouble. Long enough to stop believing in ghost stories. My grandfather used to tell tales about things living deep in the old mines. Hollow men, he called them. Said they used to be regular miners until the mountain changed them. I'd laugh it off, same as everyone else. Just stories to scare kids away from dangerous mine shafts. I wish I'd listened. It was February 1979 when everything went wrong. An ice storm had torn through Jefferson National Forest the week before, knocking out phone lines and leaving us cut off from the outside world. Beautiful and deadly, the way winter gets up here in the mountains. Ice hung from every branch like glass daggers. I was at the ranger station when the call came in on our emergency radio. 3 students from Virginia Tech had gone missing. They'd been doing some kind of geology project, mapping out the old cave systems near Devil's Creek. Smart kids, supposedly. They had proper equipment and training. But they hadn't come back. Devil's Creek Hollow sits about 34 miles from the nearest town. The area is built on top of an old coal mine that collapsed back in 1923. 47 miners died that day, trapped when the tunnels caved in. They never recovered the bodies, just sealed it up and called it a graveyard. The mine goes down 847 feet in some places. I know because I'm certified in cave rescue. Saved 23 people from underground over the years. If those kids were lost down there, I was their best chance. I grabbed my gear and radioed for backup. Got 3 other rangers, Martinez, who'd worked with me for 5 years, Chen, fresh but eager, and old Tom Berkeley, who knew these mountains better than anyone. We met at the northern entrance to the cave system just as the sun was setting. Students went in yesterday morning, Martinez said, checking his rope. Should have been out by noon. The cave entrance looked normal enough, just a wide crack in the limestone about 6 feet tall. Inside it opened up into passages that stretched for miles, some natural, some carved out by miners 100 years ago. But something felt wrong. I've been around caves my whole life. You get used to the sounds, water dripping, wind whistling through passages, bats chittering. This cave was silent. Not peaceful quiet. Wrong quiet. Like the mountain was holding its breath. "Where are the bats?" Chen asked, shining his light around. "Shouldn't there be bats hibernating?" He was right. Winter meant thousands of bats should be clustered on the ceiling. But the cave was empty. We found the students' equipment about 50 feet in. Backpacks, survey tools, notebooks, all arranged in a perfect circle on the ground. "Maybe they marked their supplies before going deeper," Martinez suggested. I picked up one of the backpacks. The notebook inside had neat handwriting, measurements, and sketches of cave formations. Normal student stuff. But the last entry made my skin crawl. "Something's watching us from the dark places." We hear voices. "Kids probably just spooked themselves," Tom said, though his voice didn't sound convinced. "College students. They read too many horror stories." We pushed deeper into the cave. Our headlamps cut through the darkness, but somehow the light didn't seem to reach very far, and our equipment started acting strange. Compass needles spinning in circles. My headlamp flickered even though I'd put in fresh batteries that morning. The temperature stayed constant. Caves are always about 52 degrees, but I kept feeling cold drafts that didn't make sense, like something was breathing. Out 2 hours in, we found the bones. They were arranged like support timbers, the way miners used to prop up tunnel ceilings. Dozens of them, human-sized, laid out in a crisscross pattern. And they were fresh. No dust, no cobwebs. Someone had placed them there recently. "What the hell is this?" Chen's voice cracked. I knelt down for a closer look. The bones had marks on them. Not from animals. From tools. And from teeth. "We need to find those students," I said, standing up. "Now." That's when we heard the voices. Faint at first, echoing from somewhere deeper in the cave. Singing. No, not singing. Chanting. Words I couldn't quite make out, in a rhythm that felt old. Wrong. Martinez grabbed my arm. "That's not the students." "How do you know?" "Because," he whispered, "they're singing in Welsh, old mining songs. My grandfather sang them." Welsh mining songs. From 1923. I didn't believe in ghost stories, but I believed in staying alive. "We stick together," I said, "and we find those kids fast." We moved toward the voices. The tunnel sloped downward, getting narrower. We had to walk single file now. Tom led, followed by Chen, then Martinez, with me taking up the rear. My headlamp kept dimming, and I had to smack it to get it working again. The singing got louder as we descended. I could make out words now. "Down in the deep where daylight won't follow. Down where we dig in the dark and the hollow." "That's a real song," Tom said quietly. "My daddy sang it. Miners sang it after the collapse, mourning the dead." "Then who's singing it now?" Chen asked. Nobody had an answer for that. We reached a junction where 3 tunnels split off in different directions. The singing seemed to come from all of them at once, bouncing off the walls in echoes that made it impossible to pinpoint. That's when Martinez's light caught something carved into the wall. Scratches, dozens of them, covering the limestone like desperate messages. "They're still here. Don't go deeper. They eat. The hollow men hunger." "These are fresh," Martinez said, running his finger over this. "Marks. Carved recently. Look, you can see where the rock dust hasn't settled yet." I pulled out my radio, tried to call back to base. Nothing but static. We were on our own. "We should go back," Chen said. "Report this. Get more help." "Those students might still be alive," I argued. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. A sound echoed from the left tunnel. A scream. High-pitched and terrified. Human. We ran. The tunnel twisted and turned, older mine works mixing with natural cave formations. Our lights bounced crazily off the walls. The screaming got louder, more desperate, then suddenly cut off. We burst into a larger chamber, maybe 20 feet across. My light swept the space, and I saw him. One of the students. A young man, maybe 20 years old. He was pressed against the far wall, eyes wide with terror, staring at something in the darkness beyond our lights. "Help me," he whispered. "Please. They're coming back." "We're here," I said, moving toward him. "You're safe now. Where are your friends?" "They took them. The Hollow Men. They took Sarah and Marcus down to the feeding chambers." "What are you talking about? Who took them?" The student grabbed my jacket, his fingers trembling. "The miners. The ones who never died. They're still here. They've been here since 1923. They survived by—" He couldn't finish, just pointed at something behind me. I turned. In the darkness beyond our lights, something moved. Multiple somethings, pale shapes, human-sized, crawling along the walls like spiders. "Run," Tom said softly. "Run right now." We didn't argue. We grabbed the student and ran back the way we'd come. Behind us I could hear sounds, scraping, clicking, and that singing again, closer now, coming from the walls themselves. The tunnel seemed different, longer. The markers we'd left were gone. It was like the cave was changing around us, rearranging itself. Chen tripped and fell hard. Before we could help him up, something grabbed his ankle and dragged him backward into the darkness. He screamed once, then nothing. "Chen!" Martinez yelled, turning back. "Don't!" I grabbed his arm. "We can't help him. Keep moving." We ran harder. The student was sobbing, mumbling about feeding chambers and teeth and things that used to be human. My lungs burned. The cave air felt thick, hard to breathe. We reached the junction again, but now there were 5 tunnels instead of 3. "Which way did we come from?" Tom asked, spinning around. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know." From every tunnel came that singing. Those voices, getting closer. And underneath it, a new sound, chewing. Martinez shone his light down one tunnel. In the beam, for just a second, I saw a face. Pale, emaciated, with eyes that reflected light like a cat's, and a mouth full of filed teeth. Then it was gone. "They're hurting us," Tom said, "like wolves. They're pushing us somewhere specific." "Where?" "Deeper." The student collapsed, too terrified to move. "They'll eat us. That's what they do. They ate the other miners to survive the collapse, and they never stopped. They've been eating people for 56 years. I looked at Tom. His face was pale. My grandfather said the rescue teams heard singing from underground, for weeks after the collapse. But eventually it stopped. Everyone figured the trapped miners had died. "They didn't die," the student whispered. "They changed." A rock fell from the ceiling. Then another. The tunnel was collapsing behind us, cutting off our escape. "Move!" I yelled. We had no choice. We went deeper into the darkness while behind us the Hollow Men followed, singing their endless song. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Our lights couldn't reach the ceiling. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, each drop echoing like a clock counting down. We stopped to catch our breath. The student, his name was David, I learned, sat with his back against the wall, shaking. "How long have you been down here?" I sked him. 2 days, maybe 3. It's hard to tell without daylight. They took Sarah and Marcus on the first day, made me watch. He couldn't continue. Martinez was checking the walls, looking for another way out. Tom stood guard at the tunnel entrance, listening for pursuit. The singing had stopped, which somehow felt worse than hearing it. "Tell me everything," I said to David. "What exactly are they?" "The miners from the 1923 collapse," he said. "They were trapped down here, no food, no water, 47 men in total darkness. They started eating each other to survive, but something changed them. The darkness, the coal dust, the desperation, I don't know. They adapted. Their eyes got bigger, their pupils expanded. They learned to see in total darkness, and they never stopped eating." "That's impossible," Martinez said. "People can't survive down here for 50 years. They did. They found an underground river for water, and they had food." David looked at me. "Us. Hikers, explorers, Anyone who came into the caves. They'd take one every few months, just enough to survive. Not enough for anyone to notice a pattern. I thought about all the missing person reports over the years. Hikers who never came back. Explorers who vanished. We'd always blamed it on people getting lost, falling into crevices, hypothermia. "How many are there?" Tom asked. I counted 12, maybe more. They move in the darkness between our lights. They're always there, watching, waiting. A sound echoed through the chamber, scraping metal on stone, like pickaxes. "They're mining," David whispered. "They still mine. They collapse tunnels to trap their prey. That's what they're doing now, sealing us in." "Then we find another way out," I said. "There has to be." My radio crackled to life. Static, then a voice. Distorted. Wrong. "Ranger Crowthorne, we have your friends. Come deeper. Come to the feeding place." It wasn't a human voice. Not anymore. The words were right, but the tone was off, like someone mimicking speech they'd forgotten how to make. "They have Chen," Martinez said. "We have to help him." "Chen's dead," Tom said bluntly. "Or worse, we need to focus on getting ourselves out." Another tunnel branched off from the chamber. This one showed signs of active mining, fresh tool marks on the walls, wooden supports that looked recently placed. A faint glow came from deep within. "Light," David said. "They have light down there. Fire. They need it for the feeding chambers." "How do you know this?" "Because they showed me, before they took Sarah and Marcus. They wanted me to see, to understand. They're proud of what they've become." The scraping sound grew louder, coming from multiple directions. They were closing in, collapsing tunnels, narrowing our options. "We have to move," I decided. "Toward the light. It's our only chance." We entered the mining tunnel. The wooden supports were made from bones, human bones, lashed together with what looked like dried sinew. The walls were covered in scratch marks, tally marks, thousands of them, counting the days, 56 years of days. Tom's light caught something ahead. A chamber, lit by what looked like burning coal. And inside, "Oh God," Martinez said. It was their settlement. Dozens of carved-out spaces in the rock walls, like cells or bunks. Tools made from bones and scavenged metal. And in the center, a large pit filled with glowing coals. Around it sat the hollow men. They were human once. You could tell from the basic shape. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. But everything else had changed. Skin pale as cave fungus. Eyes huge and black, no whites at all. Mouths full of teeth filed to points. Their fingers were long and thin, ending in nails worn down to stubs from scraping at rock. And they were eating. I won't describe what they were eating. I won't describe whose jacket I recognized in the pile. But Chen wasn't the first ranger they'd caught, and he wouldn't be the last. One of those. Em looked up and saw us. It smiled with those filed teeth. Then it spoke. "Rangers, come, join. We remember. Rangers. From before. You left us. Down here. Sealed us. In." The voice was wrong. Rasping. Like someone talking through sand. "We didn't seal you in," Tom said. "The mine collapsed. We thought you were dead." "Dead. Yes. We died. But kept living. Kept hungry. Now you understand." They stood up. All 12 of them. Surrounding us. "How do we get out?" I asked. "Just let us go. We won't tell anyone." The hollow man tilted its head, considering. "Out? No out. Only down. Only deep. Only hungry." They moved closer. Their movements were coordinated, practiced. They'd done this before. Many times. Martinez pulled out his knife. "Stay back." "Knives. Yes. We remember knives." The hollow man held up its hand, showed us fingers that had been broken and healed wrong. Still, we eat. That's when the tunnel behind us collapsed completely. A planned cave-in. They'd trapped us. "The feeding chamber," David sobbed. "They're taking us to the feeding chamber." I looked around desperately. There had to be another way out. There had to be. I saw it. A small passage barely visible behind the Hollow Men's settlement. Natural limestone, not mined. It led upward. "Tom," I said quietly. "Behind them. Up." He saw it too. Nodded slightly. "Martinez, David," I said. "On my signal, run for that passage. Don't stop for anything." "What about you?" Martinez asked. I pulled out the emergency flares from my pack. "I'm going to give you light." The Hollow Men moved closer. 10 feet away. 5 feet. I lit all 3 flares at once and threw them into the coal pit. The explosion of light was blinding. The Hollow Men screamed, a sound I'll hear in nightmares forever, and fell back, covering their huge eyes. "Go," I yelled. We ran. The passage was tight, barely width, enough to fit through. We scrambled upward, scraping our hands and knees on sharp rock. Behind us, the Hollow Men recovered from the light and gave chase. But they were faster in the dark. So much faster. David screamed as one grabbed his leg. Martinez turned back to help him. I saw the knife flash in his hand, saw him stab downward. The Hollow Man hissed, but didn't let go. "Leave me," David yelled. "Just go." "No one gets left behind," Martinez grunted, stabbing again. The Hollow Man's grip released. We pulled David up and kept climbing. The passage grew steeper, more vertical. We had to use cracks in the rock to pull ourselves up like climbing a ladder. My hands were bleeding. My headlamp was dying, the light fading to a dim yellow glow, but I could feel air moving, fresh air, from above. "We're close," Tom said. "Keep moving." A hand grabbed my ankle. I looked down and saw one of the Hollow Men climbing after us. Its black eyes reflected my dying light. Its mouth opened impossibly wide. "Rangers, sealed, us, down here. Now, you, stay, too." I kicked hard, connecting with its face. It fell, taking 2 others with it, but more were climbing. So many more. We reached a ledge. The passage continued upward, but it narrowed to barely a crack. Tom tried to squeeze through and got stuck. "I can't fit," he said. "Too old, too fat. You 3 go. I'll hold them here." "Tom, no. I'm 63 years old, William. Had a good run. You get these boys out. You tell people what happened here. You make sure they seal this place forever." He pulled out the mining explosives from his pack. Every cave rescue team carries them for emergency rock removal. But Tom had other plans. "This much explosive in a confined space," he said. "We'll bring the whole tunnel down, maybe the whole chamber system, bury these things forever." Martinez was already pushing David through the crack. The student was sobbing, too scared to argue. "Tom," I started. "Go," he yelled. "Go now." I went. I squeezed through the crack, scraping skin off my shoulders. Behind me I heard Tom's voice one last time. "Hey, you hollow bastards! Come get some light!" Then the explosion. The tunnel shook. Rock dust filled the air. I heard the roar of tons of stone collapsing, and underneath it all the screaming of the Hollow Men as they were buried alive. Again. The 3 of us climbed in silence, up and up, following that stream of fresh air. My headlamp died completely. We climbed in darkness, just like the Hollow Men. But we kept going. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time meant nothing in the dark. Then I saw it. A faint gray light. Not from a headlamp. From outside. Dawn. We climbed faster. The crack widened. We could see stars fading as the sun rose. We emerged from a small cave entrance 3 miles from where we'd entered. The ice storm had passed. The morning was clear and bright and beautiful. David collapsed in the snow, laughing and crying. Martinez sat down hard, staring at nothing. I looked back at the cave entrance. It was just a small hole in the rock. Nothing special, nothing dangerous looking. But I could hear them, faint, distant, from deep underground. singing. The hollow men weren't all dead. The collapse hadn't gotten them all. Some had been deeper in their tunnels, in other chambers. They were still down there, still hungry. They airlifted us out the next day. Hypothermia, they said. Trauma. David spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Martinez quit the Ranger service. Last I heard, he moved to Arizona, somewhere flat, with no caves. The official story was simple. Cave collapse. 1 ranger and 2 students lost. Geological instability. The mine entrances were sealed with concrete. Warning signs posted. The area declared off-limits. I stayed a ranger for another year. Tried to keep working. But every cave entrance looked wrong to me. Every dark place felt occupied. I started getting panic attacks in enclosed spaces. The doctors called it claustrophobia. I called it survival instinct. I quit on the anniversary of that February night. Took a desk job instead, pushing papers, filing reports, safe, above ground. But I still keep track. Missing person reports in Appalachia. Hikers who never come back. I mark them on a map. Every unexplained disappearance near old mine systems. There are a lot of marks. Because here's what I learned in Devil's Creek, what I know that I can't prove. There were hundreds of mine collapses throughout Appalachian history. Thousands of miners lost and sealed underground. And not all of them died. Some survived. Some adapted. Some became something else. The hollow men aren't unique. They're not even rare. They're everywhere in these mountains, in the deep places we sealed and forgot, living in the dark, waiting, hungry. Sometimes at night I think I can hear them singing, those old Welsh mining songs, echoing up from the ground beneath my feet, voices from the deep places where daylight doesn't follow. I tried telling people once, officials, other rangers, anyone who'd listen. They smiled and nodded and called it trauma, post-traumatic stress, survivor's guilt. They gave me pills and therapy and time off. So I stopped talking about it. But if you're reading this and you like to explore caves, I'll give you the only advice that matters. Don't. Don't go into abandoned mines. Don't trust that the darkness is empty. Don't think you're safe because you have lights and equipment and training, because down there, in the deep places, there are things that used to be human, things that remember being human, things that hunger. The hollow men are still singing, and they're still eating. I know because last week I got a call, another ranger asking for advice. 3 geology students had gone missing near an old mine in Kentucky. They'd been doing a mapping project. I didn't answer the call. I couldn't, because I knew exactly what happened to those students. The same thing that happened to Sarah and Marcus, the same thing that's been happening for 100 years. Some things, Sat, should stay buried. Some doors should stay sealed. Some songs should never be heard. But we keep opening the doors. We keep going deeper. We keep thinking we're safe. And the hollow men keep waiting. My name is William Crowthorne. I was a ranger for 17 years. I don't believe in ghost stories, but I believe in the hollow men. I believe because I've seen their feeding chambers. I've heard their songs. I've looked into their black eyes and seen the hunger there. And I know with terrible certainty that somewhere in the darkness beneath your feet, they're still down there, still singing, still hungry, still waiting for the next person to open the door.